Okay, Wandami Bante. Good morning, everyone, and good evening for everyone in the West. Welcome to the lesson on classification of 89 cheetahs. Today's session is scheduled to last 1.5 hours with 50 minutes on coursework and remaining 40 minutes on Q&A. I'm Tham. I am the meeting co-host who will be helping Bante and everyone in today's session. Before we invite Bante to start today's lesson, here are some gentle reminders. You will be muted except ask question. Any follow-up question, please ask during last 15 minutes. Question from the floor session. Now it's 8:30. Bante, we are done with housekeeping and now ready for your teaching. May we invite Bante to start the teaching, please? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Okay. Sumangalo Yankalo. This is auspicious time to study Abhidhamma. So let's start our study by paying homage to the Buddha, reciting Namo Tassa 3 times together. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Okay, this is our number 4 piece of my study. So in this lesson, I'm going to talk about the classification of 89 consciousness. As you know, we have already studied about the ultimate reality. Among the ultimate reality, the first types of ultimate reality is consciousness, which is called Citta in Pali. So we are going to start our study of ultimate reality from the past ultimate reality of consciousness. Okay. So in this lesson, when we are studying about the first ultimate reality of consciousness, we need to keep one thing need to keep in our mind is the characteristic of consciousness. When we call citta or consciousness, that is the basis elements, which is known as citta or consciousness. The characteristic of that consciousness is knowing the objects. So consciousness or citta just do the action of knowing the objects. So if we say through the characteristic, the citta is only one thing. It means the every types of consciousness, when we divide it into different way of classification, the different kinds of classification come into our study, but all the consciousness have the same characteristics. That is knowing the object. So we can say consciousness is one. only one thing which knows the object, which recognizes the object. That is the first thing we have to understand about the consciousness. Although it is only one, according to the characteristic of knowing the objects, it can be divided into different types according to accompaniment factors, Chitasika. So by way of natural, the law of nature, the consciousness and mental factors comes together. This means they arise together, six together. So this is their nature. That's why whenever consciousness, chitta, arise, the mental factors accompany to the consciousness. So they are arising in the group. We can say that is the mental group or mental cluster. So they arise in the group and they share the same lifespan, arise together and six together, vanish together. By seeing the accompaniment factor, we can classify the types of consciousness into different kinds. So here are some method of classification of chitta. So classification by way of planes. So we already studied about the 31 plane of existence. So consciousness can also be classified according to by way of planes. And the second type, consciousness can be classified with respect to its kind or its nature, which is called Pali in Jadi. So in common things, we can classify the peoples who come from where, according to the location and according to the family types they were born. So this is what kind of people, or they are what kind of people like this. We can classify in the same way. We can make the group, or we can make the classification according to the nature of the consciousness. And the classification according to its roots. So the roots are, I will introduce the roots in this lesson. 6 types of roots. And according to these 6 types of roots, the consciousness can be classified into groups. And also accompaniment feeling. So what kind of feelings accompany to that consciousness? And then we can name and we can make a group. So this is the way how the one types of consciousness can be in different types or can be classified into different categories. So before we continue our classification of consciousness, we need to know the walls, the 3 types of wall, loka, the satta loka. Satta loka, here satta is living beings, so loka is wall. So satta loka means the wall of living beings. And this, the wall of living beings refers to the living beings. So living being is nothing but the process of mentality and the process of materiality coming together. They are called beings, living beings. So if we classify the living being, we get the process of mentality and the process of materiality. Only these 2 things arising together at the same time, and they are named up living being. So in this case, Satta Loka reference to their being and also reference to the process of mentality and materialities. And another word, Agasa Loka. Agasa Loka is defined as the physical universe. So in other words, it's called the planes of existence. We already studied 31 planes of existence. That is Agasa Loka. And the last one, Sankhara Loka, the world of formation. So that's the world of formation include all types of conditioned phenomena of mentality and materiality. So it's included within the 5 aggregates of clinging. So here we have to understand the word clinging. So that's why the aggregate was attached by the craving and round view. That is called the aggregate of clinging. And we will clarify later the what 5 aggregates of clinging. So all types of phenomena, mental phenomena, and material phenomena are called the Sankhara Loka. So this is the 3 types of Loka. Okay, we can continue. The classification by way of plane, because we already studied about the 31 plane of existence, we can connect with that lesson 2. So these 4 types of consciousness depends on the plane of existence. Maybe you can recall the classification about the plane of existence. The lowest realms, lowest classification is the Kama Vachara or Kama, 11 Kama, sense spheres in English, sense sphere plane of existence. And if we go up, that is the 5 material sphere, that is called Rupa Vachara Loka, Rupa Bhumi. And then Arupa Vachara Bhumi, this is 4 Arupa Vachara, realm of existence, this immaterial sphere of existence. So we have 3 categories of existence and plane of existence. But here, the consciousness are 4 types. So the classification 1 to 3 comes in accordance with the classification of plane of existence. So the first one is Kama Vachara Chitta. And the consciousness that have their domain, so their domain means they always move above in their place, where in the sensuous plane of existence. But not, they cannot, they are not arising only these plane of existence of sensual planes, but they can arise in the Rupa Vachara or 5 material sphere or Arupa Vachara immaterial sphere, some of them, but not all, and also not many times, only sometimes, a few times. So mostly these types of, the first types of consciousness arise in the sensual plane of existence. That's why they are named as Kama Vachara Chitta. So that is sensual pure consciousness. Then the second type also have the same definition, just change the 5 material sphere as their domains, their place to move about or frequently arise, because the wa or vachara. So the first type, Kama Vachara, is the combination of Kama, the wa Kama, and a Vachara. So Kama can be divided into 2. The Kama, sometimes the wa Kama refers to the craving, which is the subjective sensuality. So Kama refers to craving, subjective sensuality, which can crave to the objects. which can attach to the objects. And another time, the word karma refers to the 5 external sense objects, which is called the form, sound, smell, taste, and tangible objects. So in this way, we can understand the word karma into 2 definitions, craving and 5 external sense objects. So karma and avajara, here in this case, the first meaning of karma and craving, avajara, moving about him. So the craving is running around, that's the karma avajara chitta. And also the karma avajara craving around in the sensuous plane of existence. So in this connection, we can understand the definition of karma avajara. In the same way, rupa avajara, here rupa is the plane of existence, that is the 5 material sphere of existence. The consciousness that frequently arises in the 5 material sphere of existence is called rupa avajara. Sometimes they arise in the kama avajara realms and also arupa avajara realms, but mostly arise in the 5 material sphere. That's why they are named as rupa avajara chitta, 5 material sphere consciousness. The third one, arupa avajara consciousness, is they have their domain in the immaterial sphere of existence. So they mostly arise in the arupa avajara realms, which is called the immaterial sphere of existence. Sometimes they arise in the kama avajara and rupa avajara, but not many times. That's why they usually arise and frequently arise in the arupa avajara realms. Thus, they are called arupa avajara chitta, or immaterial sphere consciousness. The last category of consciousness in this classification is lokuttara chitta, supramundane consciousness. So here, the word lokuttara can be divided into 2, loka and uttara. Loka refers to the world, and 3 types of world, and uttara is beyond, going beyond, or transcended to. So that this world directly related to the meaning of nibbana. So can refers to the nibbana, but not only nibbana, the consciousness. So the types of consciousness that directly accomplish to the realization of nibbana can also be called the lokuttara. So altogether, here in this case, because we are talking about the consciousness, and nibbana is not consciousness, it is another category of ultimate reality. That's why nibbana will not be included in this case. So only the consciousness will include in this case. And for the definition of lokuttara. So find the word chitta, together with the word chitta, lokuttara chitta. It refers to the types of consciousness that directly accomplish the realization of nibbana. So that types of consciousness, it is known as the path consciousness, magga chitta, and fruition consciousness, phala chitta. Altogether 8. These 8 kinds of consciousness take nibbana as their object when they arise. That's why we can say these are the consciousness that directly accomplish the realization of nibbana, taking nibbana as its object. So this is the classification according to the plane of existence. Then another classification, before we go to another classification, we need to know the karma and results, the 2 types of karma and 2 types of results. So the karma, at the beginning, we need to understand the definition and the precise meaning of the Pali word karma. The Pali word karma means the volitional activities. Volitional activities. It is a kind of mental activities. The volition is one of the 52 mental fetters. So volitional activities is the whatever activities of physical activity, verbal activities, or mental activity caused by the volition of together with the volition. That's called the volitional activities. That is twofold. So the first one, kusala karma, and second, akusala karma. Kusala karma means the volitional activity associated with wholesome consciousness. So wholesome is kusala. Wholesome is kusala. And I will define the meaning of the word wholesome or kusala in this slide. But here, the wholesome conscious, the volitional activity associated with wholesome consciousness is called the kusala karma, and volitional activity associated with unwholesome consciousness is called akusala karma. So in this case, we can understand, we can make the conclusion about the karma. Karma is only two, whether it is wholesome or unwholesome, only two types. But there's no karma which is not identified as the wholesome or unwholesome. So the karma must be identified whether it is wholesome or unwholesome, and it must be any of them. It means there's no neutral. Okay, so like the karma has two types. The result of karma, which is called the vipaka. The Pali word vipaka means the result of something. So here the result of karma is also divided into two. So kusala vipaka chitta. So here in this case we are studying about the chitta. We refer to the consciousness. But there can be the vipaka. There can be the vipaka that is called the materiality, included in the materiality is the results. So, but they are not included in the vipaka chitta because they are not consciousness. So here, kusala vipaka chitta and akusala vipaka chitta are the two types of resultants. So kusala vipaka chitta refers to the resultant consciousness of wholesome karma. So these are the products of the wholesome karma. The first type of karma produces the first type of resultant consciousness. So in this way, we can understand wholesome and resultants of wholesome. And in the same way, in second way, the akusala vipaka, here also we can make we can add the word chitta. Akusala vipaka chitta. So the resultant consciousness of unwholesome karma. So that is the products of the second types of karma, akusala karma. So akusala karma produce akusala vipaka consciousness, akusala vipaka chitta. So in this way, we understand cause and effect relationship in the karma and its result. So wholesome produce the wholesome karma or wholesome resultant, and unwholesome karma produce unwholesome vipaka, unwholesome resultant. In this case, we get the karma and result, and also three types: wholesome, unwholesome, and resultant. So wholesome and unwholesome are causative, and vipaka are effect of these causative activities. So another category of chitta also have, but next slide will be more clear, but just introduce the kiriya chitta. So that is the functional consciousness. This is not included in the wholesome types or unwholesome. And also non-productive, so unproductive. They cannot produce anything. So this types of kriya citta, are out of these two classification of karma and result, not related to the karma and also not related to the vipaka. So we have to understand this is also another classification of consciousness. In this way, we will have the 4 types of consciousness. So here classification according to the jati comes. So 4 types of consciousness according to the jati. Jati is its nature. That's why we will understand according to their nature. So the first type is kusala citta. As I said, the kusala karma and kusala citta. So the volition activity based on the consciousness kusala together with the consciousness of the wholesome, they are called the kusala citta karma. So the kusala citta, akusala citta here, okay. So akusala citta is unwholesome consciousness. This is the translation. So in order to understand the meaning, what is unwholesome and what is akusala, the definition is the mentally unhealthy, and also morally blameworthy. This is called the sawaja in Pali. So this is the first part of the characteristic of unwholesomeness. Whenever unwholesome consciousness arises, and we can recognize it has the nature of mentally unwholesome, mentally unhealthy, and from the moral perspective, it is blameworthy. That is the characteristic of akusala, unwholesome. Another part of the characteristic of unwholesome is it is productive of painful result. It means that can produce the painful result. That is called in Pali dukkha vipaka. So this together with these two, coming together with these two are sawaja, dukkha vipaka. These are two factors of the characteristic of unwholesome consciousness. Whenever types of consciousness arise, you can check whether it is unwholesome or not. If it is unwholesome, there must be the characteristic of mentally unhealthy or morally blameworthy. And it must be productive of painful result. That is unwholesome. That's why you can identify the consciousness with these two characteristics. This is unwholesome. So that unwholesome consciousness always accompanied by any of the 3 unwholesome roots. So here, unwholesome roots are 3: greed, hatred, or delusion. So these 3 will not come at the same time, but you can find any of them. So unwholesome consciousness has these roots. When you can find the root greed as it is roots, you can identify this is unwholesome. And when you observe that types of consciousness, it has that characteristic of mentally unhealthy, morally blameworthy, and productive of painful result. So hatred, delusion, the same. So this is the first type of consciousness according to the kinds of according to the nature. The second type of consciousness is akusala citta. Kusala citta, sorry. Kusala citta, it is translated as the wholesome consciousness. So when you observe the wholesome consciousness, you understand the characteristic that is the mentally healthy and morally, from moral perspective, the morally blameless. That is called anawaja in Pali, anawaja characteristic. And also that consciousness can produce the pleasant result, sukha vipaka. So you can identify any types of consciousness as kusala by this characteristic. If it is mentally healthy or morally blameless, and also can produce the pleasant results, that is called kusala. And you can identify this is wholesome consciousness. And when you follow the roots, you can find 3 roots: non-greed, non-hatred, or non-delusion. That is, they are the roots of wholesome consciousness. So, but in this way, we can identify the wholesome consciousness, kusala citta. And the third types of consciousness is vipaka citta. As I mentioned, the kusala and akusala, these two are the causative, and vipaka, the result of the causes of wholesome and unwholesome. So here the third type of consciousness is resultant consciousness. Result of what? Result of wholesome or result of unwholesome. That is the wholesome consciousness. This is the resultant consciousness. That's why the third type of vipaka consciousness arises through the ripening of karma. So volitional activity, it is done and wait for some time or wait for the time according to its nature to be ripened. Then when it is ripened, it's produced the result. So one of the result is the resultant consciousness. So here karma refers to the volitional action. And the last types of consciousness in this classification is kiriya citta, translated as the functional consciousness. It's neither karma nor karma results. So no karma, no karma result, but it is a kind of consciousness. It has the characteristic of knowing the objects. So that is mere activity, just the mental action. It is not included in karma or not in karma result. So it is activity, mental activity, but not capable of producing karmic result. So that types of consciousness cannot be included in the causative group because that cannot produce karmic results. In this way, we have the 4 categories of consciousness according to the classification of Jadi. So unwholesome, wholesome, resultant, functional. So unwholesome, if we divide it, 89 consciousness into these 4 types, we get the number. The unwholesome consciousness 12, wholesome consciousness 21, and resultant consciousness 36, functional consciousness 20. In this way, the 89 consciousness is divided into 4 groups. So here, unwholesome 12 unwholesome consciousness is unwholesome karma. You can identify unwholesome karma. And wholesome 21, we can say the wholesome karma, but not all can produce the plane of existence. The 4 mega citta just produce the fruition consciousness, the phala citta. But anyway, we will understand that later. So here the groove. So if we make the groove into 2 from 4 classification, the last 2, resultant and functional, they are not wholesome and unwholesome. That is why we can make a groove in the another type, that is resultant consciousness and functional consciousness. Because they are not included in the wholesome and unwholesome, they are named as indeterminate, abhyagata. This is according to the classification of the Tika Matika. That's called the tribe system of classification. So in this system, all the ultimate reality are divided into 3 and named. This is what, and this is what, and this is what. So classification of Tika, so tribe, the Tika Matika, and Dhammasangani is mentioned. And in this way, we can understand wholesome, unwholesome, resultant, and function into four, and also we can understand wholesome, unwholesome, and abhyagata. In the nature, these two are not set as wholesome or unwholesome. That's why they are indeterminate, abhyagata. So this is just, the later I have the chart to clarify, but here I like to introduce the classification in detail about the unwholesome, wholesome, resultant, and functional. We get the number here, and how we get that number here. I mentioned that akusala chitta included only in the sense sphere consciousness according to the type, but they can arise in other realms too, and from material sphere, fine material sphere, and also immaterial sphere. And the akusala chitta can arise. Akusala unwholesome consciousness can arise. But in their classification, they are usually or frequently arise in the sense sphere plane of existence. That's why they are included under the classification of sense sphere consciousness. And okay, all 12 types of consciousness, sense sphere consciousness, we are trying to relate it to two types. So the classification under related to the plane, and the classification related to its nature. So according to its nature, the akusala, it is the name akusala come, and all types of unwholesome akusala consciousness are sense sphere according to the plane of existence. And in second types, wholesome consciousness, so divided into different category according to the plane of existence. So according to Jadi, we can say that is, oh sorry. Oh, it's closed. Okay. So the wholesome consciousness, kusala chitta, divided sense sphere wholesome and fine material sphere wholesome, and also immaterial sphere wholesome. It means the wholesome consciousness are connected to the three category or plane of existence. So we can find in the sense sphere also 8 types of wholesome consciousness, and 5 material sphere wholesome 5, immaterial sphere wholesome 4, and also supramundane. It is out of the plane of existence. So altogether 21 types of consciousness come in this way. And resultant consciousness also the same. It's produced by the wholesome and unwholesome. So wholesome consciousness related to all types of plane. So resultant consciousness also related to the all types of plane. But sense sphere resultant consciousness 23, because the wholesome resultant and unwholesome resultant come together. So it's much more than wholesome number. So become 23. And 5 material sphere just resultant of wholesome. That's why the only 5, same as the wholesome. There's no in 5 material sphere unwholesome resultant, only wholesome resultant. That is why we get the same number. So here 5 material sphere wholesome 5 and also 5 material sphere resultant 5. In the same way, in material sphere also, that is escape from the productive of unwholesome. That's why same as the wholesome consciousness. So immaterial sphere wholesome 4 in the same way, immaterial sphere resultant also 4. Okay. Okay, my computer is not working properly for the PowerPoint plane. Sorry to disrupt. Okay, I can share only in this way. Okay, so supramundane resultants are 4. So altogether 36 resultants vipaka citta. Then the functional consciousness, sense sphere functional consciousness 11, and 5 material sphere functional consciousness 5, and immaterial sphere functional consciousness 4. And there is no supramundane functional consciousness. So in this way, we classify according to its nature, according to Jadi, unwholesome, wholesome, resultant, functional. We will study more about the detailed number and detailed classification in next lessons. So wholesome, unwholesome consciousness and wholesome consciousness, in this way, we will take our time in the studying of detailed classification of consciousness. So you don't need to worry. So just get the number. It's okay for this time. So another classification, I'd like to introduce that classification according to the rules. So consciousness also have their rules, accompanying rules. So these are 6 types: lobha, dosa, moha, and also alobha, adosa, amoha. So these are 6 types of rules. Depends on the rules. So we can get the name ahetuka citta. So consciousness can be classified as the ahetuka, or the second type sahetuka. Ahetuka means rootless consciousness. There is no rules. So no rules mean not related to any of 6 rules. That types of consciousness are called the ahetuka citta and rootless consciousness. Another type related to the roots, any of the roots, is called the sahetuka, the consciousness with roots. So it is accompanied by the roots. So this classification comes according to the rules. So when you check in the accompaniment factors of that consciousness, if you can find any of the 6, you can name that is sahetuka. If you cannot find any rules in accompaniment factor, that kind of consciousness is called ahetuka, the first type. And if you can find any of them, that types of consciousness is called sahetuka. So among the sahetuka in second types of consciousness, that we can find among the accompaniment factor, if we can find only one rules, it is called the eka hetuka, because eka is 1. So 1 roots eka hetuka. If we can find 2 rules, that is called dvihetuka. So 2 roots consciousness, 2 rooted consciousness. And that the last one, if we can find the 3 roots among the 6, among the mental factors, and we can name that consciousness as the Tihetuka consciousness. So this is the classification according to the roots. So similarly, we have another classification related to the individual. That is Ahetuka Pukala. We already introduced the 12 types of individual. Among them, the lowest two are Ahetuka, in Ahetuka ordinary person. So these are called Ahetuka because rootless individual, because their rebirth Lincoln consciousness, which is called the Patisandhi Chitta, is not accompanied by any of these 6 roots. That's why these persons are called Ahetuka Pukala, rootless individual. And the others, apart from these 2, other individual, you can say the Sahetuka Pukala, but there, in that classification of individual, we only name the Tihetuka Pukala, and the others are noble person, according to their attainments. But we can say that Tihetuka Pukala also, these are individual with rules. With rules mean they are rebirth linking consciousness, which is called the Patisandhi Chitta, is accompanied by the roots. So, but their roots can be only the aloba, amoha, adosa, because the loba, dosa, moha are unwholesome mental factors. So unwholesome mental factors cannot arise together with the Patisandhi consciousness, which is called reverse Lincoln consciousness. These are types of the resultants. Okay, later we will identify more and more. So there, in that case, Dihetuka, they are double-rooted individual and triple-rooted individual. So there's no single-rooted individual. Okay, so we come here, our charts. So here in this case, we already mentioned about the classification related to the plane of existence, classification related to the nature, jati, and also classification related to the hetu, so roots. After that, we can conclude all of them in the chart. So here, the chart of consciousness 89. So from the beginning, let's start from the beginning of the charts. The first, the number 1, akusala, unwholesome, is 12. So we already get the number. So how it's become the 12 is loba mula, so greed-rooted 8 consciousness, and dosa mula, hatred-rooted consciousness 2, and moha mula, delusion-rooted consciousness 2. This is the classification of 12 unwholesome consciousness that basically arise in the ordinary person. So because we have the greed, hatred, and delusion, that's why the consciousness rooted in the greed, hatred, and delusion commonly arise to the Putujana and ordinary person. So this is the first types of classification. So this is included in the sense sphere. So in the right side of the chart, the cell, say the Kama Vajara. So according to the plane of existence, this is called the unwholesome consciousness, as I mentioned in the previous slide. The Kama Vajara, the Akusala unwholesome consciousness are included under the classification of Kama Vajara. There's no Rupa Vajara unwholesome or Arupa Vajara unwholesome, only the Kama Vajara unwholesome. Then the second types of consciousness, Ahetuka. So this is related to the classification according to the roots. So because they don't have any roots among the accompaniment factors, that's why the consciousness are called the rootless consciousness. Yeah, in number, they are 80 in number. So if we divide it into the further classification, you come unwholesome resultant. So this is resultant, but it is the products of unwholesome cause. That's why unwholesome resultant. Akusala vipaka 7. And the second type is rootless wholesome resultant. Here, ahetuka kusala vipaka 8. These 8 types of consciousness are products of wholesome. Product of wholesome. That's why they are called the wholesome resultant. But they don't have accompanying roots. That's why they are called rootless. In order to make difference between the other types of wholesome resultant, other types of resultant here, and kama vachara resultant and rupa vachara resultant, arupa vachara resultant. They also have another classification of another types of resultant consciousness. In order to differentiate, we need to add the word rootless, in Pali ahetuka. So the second classification of ahetuka consciousness is rootless and wholesome resultant consciousness. They are 8 in number. And the last type of ahetuka consciousness is rootless functional consciousness. Here also we need to add the word rootless because there are another types of consciousness, functional consciousness in three types, above 3 types also. That's why in order to differentiate from them, we need to add rootless. That's why rootless functional consciousness in Pali, ahetuka kiriya chitta, are 3 in number. So altogether, we get the ahetuka 18 consciousness. So you don't need to worry what are these or like this. And because we will take the different class, the akusala consciousness for 1 day and ahetuka consciousness 1 day in this way, we will study more. That's why just keep the classification in your mind. It's enough for this lesson. Okay, so another classification, number 3 classification of consciousness is the kama vachara sobhana. So coming together, kama vachara, I already mentioned, the consciousness usually and frequently arise in the sense-pure plane of existence is called the kama vachara. So the new word sobhana is introduced here. Sobhana is beautiful. Here, the left side show the beautiful. The sobhana, beautiful. Sobhana consciousness, beautiful consciousness. So here, the third type of consciousness is named as the kama vachara sobhana, sense pure. Kama vachara is sense pure. Sobhana is beautiful. So altogether, 24 in number. So how it's become 24 is much more easier than the previous 2. So wholesome, kusala, and resultant, vipaka, and functional kiriya. The 3 types. Each of them has the 8 in number. That's why it becomes altogether 24. So wholesome produces the resultant, but functional is mental activities, but is unproductive. It cannot produce. So this, the last type, kriya, different from wholesome because it cannot produce. And different from vipaka because it is not the products of wholesome. So we have the 3 categories in kama vachara sobhana, sense pure, beautiful consciousness. Then we can continue to number 4, rupa vachara. Okay, so the kama vachara consciousness, here all sense pure, beautiful usually mostly arise in this sense pure plane of existence, 11 sense pure plane of existence. Okay, number 4 types of rupa vachara consciousness. This is translated as 5 materials pure consciousness, 15 in number. So this is also easy to classify. The causative, the wholesome, 5, and resultant also same as 5, and kiriya, functional. This is the the third category, also 5. In this way, we can understand Rupa Vachara, 5 material sphere consciousness of 15. And the number 5 classification, Arupa Vachara, translated as immaterial sphere. So 12 in number, divided into 3 categories. Each of them has the 4. So wholesome, Arupa Vachara Kusala, or immaterial, wholesome immaterial sphere consciousness, number 4. And Vipaka, number 4, and Kriya, number 4. Then the last category of Lokuttara, supramundane 8. So it has only 2 category of path and fruition. So path, Magga 4, and Phala, fruition 4. Altogether 8 Lokuttara Chitta. In this way, we can get the 89 consciousness according to the classification of their nature and their roots, like this, their plane of existence. So here we need to understand the lowest two. The first, Akusala and Ahituka, are collectively called Asobana Chitta. Asobana Chitta, because they are not beautiful. Sobana is beautiful. The word art has the negative meaning. So Asobana means not beautiful. So not beautiful means the unwholesome consciousness are not beautiful because they are rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion, unwholesome mental fetters. That is why that consciousness are regarded as not beautiful consciousness. And Ahituka consciousness, although they are not rooted in lobha, dosa, moha, greed, hatred, and delusion, that they don't have any roots. Like this, they are like a floating plants in the water, no roots. It's not stable. That's why these Ahituka, rootless consciousness, are also regarded as the not beautiful consciousness, Asobana consciousness. Now, in number, altogether, 12 unwholesome and 18 rootless becomes the 30 in numbers. Asobana consciousness, Asobana Chitta, not beautiful consciousness. So, in this line, we can, here in this column, we can understand the 54 sense pure consciousness. So it includes 3 types, unwholesome, rootless, and sense pure beautiful, 24. So unwholesome 12, rootless 18, and sense pure beautiful 24 becomes the 54 Kama Vachara Chitta, or sense pure consciousness, because they usually arise or frequently arise in the sense pure realms of existence, Kama Vachara. And also, the number 4 and number 5, Rupa Vachara, 5 material sphere consciousness 15, and Arupa Vachara, immaterial sphere consciousness 12, together 27 consciousness are collectively called Mahakata consciousness. So Mahakata means sublime or sublime consciousness. So it's become in the higher ranks. Without the meditation practice, they cannot arise. So they need specific condition to become sublime. So they are regarded as the sublime consciousness. So together, the 54 sense pure consciousness and 27 sublime consciousness coming together become the Lokiya Chitta. Lokiya means mundane. So only the category of supramundane left. So if we roughly classify consciousness, we get the classification only 2. The one is One is supramundane and another type is mundane. So here in this column, the 5 categories are included under the title of Lokiya Chitta, mundane consciousness. So we get the supramundane and mundane. So supramundane 8 and mundane consciousness 81. It's become the 89 consciousness. In this way, we can understand the consciousness or classification of consciousness. So if you select off, if you are interested in the classification to make by yourself, and you can classify according to the Jadi in this chart. So you can check according to Jadi means wholesome, unwholesome, resultant, and functional, 4 categories. So you can select out from this chart. So the first class or 12 unwholesome already. You get the 12, the first class. And what are the 21 wholesome consciousness? You can select. So in second type, Aheduga, there's no wholesome consciousness because this is the second type also resultants, not wholesome. That's why we can skip. So we can select the wholesome consciousness in the third category. Here, number 8, and here in number 4, we get the 5. So 8, 5, and here in Aruba Vajra, we get 4. So 8, 5, 4 becomes 17. And the mega also wholesome. So wholesome nature, that's why including mega, supramundane, wholesome consciousness. It becomes 21 wholesome consciousness. You can select from this chart. And in the same way, Vipaka, you can identify in this 23 Vipaka of sense sphere in this chart. And also altogether 36. So altogether 36 resultant consciousness. Here, okay, here the number, all the number can be identified in the charts. So we can select Vipaka resultant consciousness in the charts. Here, the first classification, unwholesome resultant. But although whether it is unwholesome or wholesome, we can identify as the resultant. Unwholesome resultant or wholesome resultant, both of them are included under the classification of resultants. That is why we get then number 7 in the Ahetuka first, and here also resultants. So among the 18 Ahetuka, there are 15 resultant consciousness. So we get the resultant consciousness for 15, and together with 8 of this 8 of this Vipaka, it's become the 23 since pure consciousness. Then when we add more resultant of 5 material sphere, immaterial sphere, it becomes the 32. And together with the Palak fruition consciousness, which is called the supramundane resultant consciousness. So altogether 36 Vipaka consciousness you can select from this chart. And also Kriya Chitta, altogether 20 Kriya Chitta, functional consciousness. So there's no in Agusala, only it starts from the rootless consciousness, rootless functional 3, and Kriya. So since pure beautiful has the functional 3, altogether 11, and here 5, and Kriya functional 4. This becomes the 20. So there is no functional consciousness in the supramundane. In this way, we can identify the classification of consciousness according to its nature in this chart. And also here only Aheduka, only 18. So if you take off 18 among the 89, there will be 71 consciousness. 71 consciousness are Sahituka. So you can identify Ahituka and Sahituka. So Ahituka 18 and Sahituka with roots become 71 because the rest all including Akusala or Kamawachara Sobana, Rubawachara Sobana, Arubawachara Sobana, Lakutara are Sahituka because here the Ahituka is selected out already. In this way, the classification of according to the Hetu also identified by this chart and according to the plane of existence. So here Kamawachara, the Kama realms, and here Rubawachara according to the Rupa realms, Arubawachara according to the Arupa realms. So Lakotara is out of the plane of existence because Lakotara itself is go beyond the world, go beyond the plane of existence. So in this way, we can understand the classification of 89 types of consciousness. Here we need to understand the usage of the Mahagata. Here I say the Mahagata in the footnote. Here, 15 5-material sphere consciousness and 12 immaterial sphere consciousness are collectively called Mahagata Chitta. It's 27 sublime, lofty, or exalted consciousness because free from hindrances. So through the practice of concentration meditation or samatha meditation, the meditator suppress the hindrances and then he attained the Rupavachara. It is the absorption state of concentration, which is known as the jhana. So Rupavachara jhana and Arupavachara jhana, they are called Mahagata Chitta, sublime consciousness. Okay, for this lesson, it is enough to explain about the classification of 89 types of consciousness. But we will classify more and more in the following classes in detail, one after another. Okay, I'm going to stop here, my explanation. So we will continue to the question and answer session.
Thank you, Bhante. We have received 2 questions from a student. May Bhante allow me to read them for you, please?
Okay.
So these 2 questions are from Dharma friend Didi Haryadi. Question 1 is, Vandami Bhante, for Namapanati concept name, how should we classify 37 body Bhakya Dhamma, Punagriya Watu, and Dasa Paramita? For each category above, kindly explain it in detail.
Okay, so the question is, the very large question. As you know, that Bodhibhakya Dhamma altogether 37. So in order to understand one after another, because the questioner asked they do explain in detail. So in detail, it's not easy to explain in short time because even the classification itself come in large number. That's why, so I will give the method to identify. So the questioner can identify for him or herself. Because the Bodhibhakya Dhamma, 37, but in the category, Satipatthana, 4 Satipatthana. So we have to understand what are the 4 Satipatthana. So Kaya Anupasana Satipatthana, Vedana Anupasana Satipatthana, Chitta Anupasana Satipatthana, Dhamma Anupasana Satipatthana. So all are the name. The first one is the name, the first types of Satipatthana. second types of satipatthana. In this way, they are given the name in their respective name. So when we follow to check whether it is, which type of panyati. So we have to understand the name first, the name of the meaning of the name and the meaning of the name. So if the name, the meaning of the name directly contact with the reality, so real nature, which means that like a matter is rupa. So the first class, okay. So the first class rupa, matter, because the word rupa, the name rupa and the meaning matter directly relate to the ultimate reality. That's why that is called Vijamana Panyati, the concept of real. And here in this case, second one, feeling. The name is Vedana in Pali, but in English it is called feeling. Anyway, when we hear the name and we follow the meaning of the name, at that time we touch to the ultimate reality of the feeling. That's why it is also included in the first category of Nama Panyati, is concept of real, because they really exist as the ultimate reality. In the same way, when we follow the classification of the 37 Bodhipakkhiya Dhamma, which is starting from the Kaya Anupassana Satipatthana. So you touch that through the name, you touch to the mindfulness. So mindfulness is really existing according to the ultimate reality in ultimate sense. That is why that name is called the Vijamana Panyati, included in the first category of classification of Nama Panyati. In the same way, you can classify every 37 Bodhipakkhiya one after another. All of them indicating to the ultimate reality. Those are included, mostly included in the Mandavedas, and some of them related to the consciousness, the supramundane consciousness. That is why they all, Bodhipakkhiya Dhamma, are under the classification of number 1, Vijamana Panyati. So in the same way, the Punyakriya Vuttu, and Punyakriya Vuttu are 10 in number. So Dana, Sila, Bhavana, in this way. So when you hear the word Dana, that is the name. Dana is name. But when you consider the meaning, the Dana refers to, sometimes the Dana, you understand the donation, the manner of donation, manner of giving. But actually, in this case, the Dana refers to the volition, which caused the donation. So that is why the volition is a kind of Mandavedas included under the ultimate reality. That is why you can say the word Dana, the name Dana, is a concept of real. The real is under the first types of Panyati. So Sila, when you talk about the Sila, you understand the observing something or like this. But in reality, we talk about what does Sila mean? The 3 types of Mandaveda, 3 types of Mandaveda, Samma Vaca, Samma Kammanta, and Samma Ajiva. 3 types. That is called Sila. So through the touching, that meaning of ultimate reality, you can name that's the word Sila as the Vijamana Panyati. So in this way, you can classify. And whenever you call the name and following the name and the meaning, it touches to the reality, not just on the on the group of something. That is called the first class Vijamana Panyati. So it is different from the land or mountain. Here, land in Pali, land is called the Bhumi. So the word Bhumi does not touch to the ultimate reality. The word Bhumi just touch to the group of the materialities, which is known as the earth or the stone, or like this, made by the something composed by that. So that's why the Bhumi is called another one, Avijamana Panyati. But in case of the Punyakriya Vatu and Bodhipakya Dhamma, all related to the ultimate reality, that is why they are Vijamana Panyati. And another group, the questioner asked is Paramita. So Paramita also Dana Paramita, Sila Paramita. So what makes the Paramita? The real essence of Paramita is the qualification. So Dana Paramita refers to the volition, the qualification. The qualification really is it in the ultimate reality. That's why they are called, I think in my understanding, the Paramita are also included under the first category of Vijamana Panyati. So these are reference to the qualification of the Bodhisattva, the Paramita. And that is why Bodhisattva and also the other individual for the individual Paramita. So that's why all included in the question are related to the first type of Nama Panyati, Vijamana Panyati. Okay.
Thank you, Bante. Second question is, in Dhamma Niyama Sutta, the term Sabbe Sankhara Anicchati, Sabbe Sankhara Dukkati, and Sabbe Sankhara Anattati. How should we classify those three terms under Nama Panati categories? Please explain.
Yes. There also, yeah, maybe the questioner refers to the Sabbi Sankhara, the word Sankhara. Sankhara refers to the ultimate reality of mentality and materiality under the classification of the five clinging aggregates. So they are also reference to the ultimate reality. That's why the first class of the Vijamana Panyati, the same under the first class of Vijamana Panyati. And if refers to the anicca or dukkha or anatta, so that also touch the characteristic which is really existing. So the other Panyati does not have the anicca nature and dukkha nature and anatta nature. That's why they directly touch into the ultimate reality. That's why they are also included in the past class of Vijamana Panyati. Okay.
Okay, so we have, so right now is 9:48 Singapore time. We have 27 minutes before 10:15. Maybe seek permission from Bante to take question from the floor.
Okay. Okay. Who is that? Just got more to understand.
So just two reminders to all the participants. Please keep all questions within the scope of this course and be concise and brief. And please raise hand if you have questions and be patient to wait for your turn. So Dharma friend Robin Young, please proceed with your questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, Bante. Bante, I have three questions, Bante. So the first one is I want to ask about the Tawatingsa realm, Bante. So as far as I know right now, the Tawatingsa realm is mainly consists of the Dewa that in their previous life, there are group of people that doing the deeds together, Bante, good karma together. So there are 33, if I remember it correctly, Bante. So hence the name of Tawatingsa, Bante. But is it always the case that the Tawatingsa always be filled with 33 person like that, Bante? Because it seems it's quite improbable to like every time it's always 33, Bante. So or it will change later like that, Bante?
Okay, that's the a little bit complicated. Naming. That as we understand, in this time it is called the Tao Te Sa. So the commentary is explained in this way because that the ram is named in this due to this story, referring to the Saka made his wholesome deed like this. But before this Saka also there are many Saka. It means the lifespan of this king of the Dewa is very short compared to the existence of the plains. So ever since the plane is already exist before the Saka was born. So the name Tawatinsa, it seems to understand for this time, this time of people make the Tawatinsa. Maybe it's become the, in my understanding, if is the number can be less and more, the is 22, it become the change like this.
Okay. Okay,
So
Bante.
yes, that is just the name. Yeah,
So in the future, it may be possible the name will change like that, Bante.
I think so, but the literature does not mention about that. So just
Ah,
whenever it talk about the 33, the second Dewa realm, is always refers to the that 33 people
oh,
and their
okay, Bante.
and their life. So
Okay, Bante. Okay, Bante. And then the second question, Bante, in the Newa Sanya Nasanya Ayarana realm, Bante. So is it only the perception that becomes subtle, Bante, or are all the mental factors become subtle as well, Bante?
yes, because the Sanya leads the group of manifesta. That's why subtle, all are subtle, but subtle does not mean not powerful. Subtle, as you see in this case, the subtle and powerful come together like this. So because subtle is more powerful, like this. So all
Oh,
the
okay.
manifesta are subtle.
Okay, Bante.
Yeah.
Including the Chitta as well, Bante?
But it was not much different to the Chitta because Chitta just make the knowing the object. So knowing the object cannot be subtle, because it becomes strong, they're powerful.
Okay, Bante.
Yes.
And Bante, the last question. Can Bante explain in more detail about the difference of the Satta Loka and Sankara Loka, Bante? Because I cannot understand what is the difference between those two.
Mhm. Okay, it's a good question. So both of them reference to the two process of mentality and materiality. But Sattva Loka, we just focusing on the form of the Sattva, the beings, not included in the inanimate things. So the process arises in the sattva, and also we recognize as a sattva beings is called the sattva loka, and all the formation and inside the being or outside things like this, all are the sankhara loka, but the orientation, the focus is on the changing and the form of formation. So because they are called formation under the ever changing of nature of under changing impermanence and suffering and non-self in this way. These are signs of the sankhara. That's why the especially difference is the focus. They all focus on the being. It is called the sattva loka. And the same thing, the mentality and materiality in the being, if we focus from the perspective of the formation, it is called the sankhara loka. So the different perspectives get a different name. But the difference is sattva loka only include the beings, living beings, sport, the mental process and physical process. The sankhara loka can include the outside of the beings. The things also can be included.
Oh, okay, Bante. So Sattaloka is only covering the beings and Sankhara Loka covers all phenomena, Bante.
Okay.
So it means that the Sattaloka can be included in Sankhara Loka as well, Bante?
Sure.
Okay, Bante. Thank you very much, Bante.
Okay.
Sadhu. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Bante.
Okay.
So Dharma friend, Caroline, please proceed with your question.
Thank you, Wendy, for teaching. I have only one question is rootless, wholesome, resultant. Akusala, ahetuka kusala vipaga cheta. I was wondering why they are not beautiful because it's wholesome cheta.
It's not wholesome. Ahetuka kusala vipaga. Right?
Yes.
Yes, the second category of ahituka. It means not only because vipaga chitta also included in the beautiful, in the 24 sense pure consciousness, there vipaga and functional also included. But here this type you mentioned is ahituka kusala vipaga. That is a vipaga, but because it is included under the ahituka, the reason why it is included under the ahituka is not because of it is not unwholesome. It is not wholesome. It is because of not related to the roots, any roots. When they arise, there is no roots in the accompaniment of feathers. That is what they are called the rootless ahituka.
So that's why they are put in not beautiful.
Yes, right.
Category.
Not beautiful, right. Not
So
beautiful.
rootless influence wholesome in order to be beautiful or not beautiful.
Yes. It's products of wholesome. Products of wholesome.
Product of wholesome, but they are rootless.
Yes.
That's why they are not beautiful.
Yeah, not beautiful, of course, yes, right.
Asobana.
Right, of course.
Thank you, Pandit. Sadhu.
Thank you, Bante. Dharma friend Sati, please unmute yourself. Please proceed with your question.
Hello, Bante.
Okay.
Bante, I have a question. Bante, is it aloha and dosa among
Sorry, your voice is very low. Can you
hear, Bante? Now
okay.
Can you hear?
Yes, okay.
Bante, is it alova, adosa, amo equal to Shraddha, Buddhi, Vitaka, Bante?
Sorry, not clear.
Alova, adosa, amoha, is it equal to Shraddha, Buddhi, Vitaka?
Shraddha, Buddhi, what does it mean?
Yeah. Saddha, Buddhi, and Vitaka.
No, not related to that. Aloba, adosa, amoha are separate mental fetters. Saddha also one of the mental fetters, and aloba, adosa, amoha also the others. You can say the amoha refers to the buddhi. So buddhi also reference to the panya. Amoha also referring to the panya. So you can say that buddhi and amoha may be the same, but the others different mental fetters. Okay. It's okay.
Thank you, Bante. Dharma friend Indriya, please proceed with your question.
Wandami Bante, I have two questions. The first one is, why in Lokutara Dhamma no Kiryacita? And then the second one, can we understand that Panyati help us to understand the Paramata Sacha? Thank you, Bante.
First one is Lokuttara has no functional consciousness of the Kiriya Chitta. Okay, there we will talk about in detail when we studied about the Lokuttara Chitta in the further lesson. So for your question, I can say that because Lokuttara Chitta has the nature of wholesome and it is result. Wholesome is path and its result is fruition. So path consciousness can make it is work. It is work in one time. So removing the related mental defilements. So it is done only one time. Does not need to repeat it again and again. So Lokuttara Chitta does not have the function there. It does not mean, it means just action is impossible because Lokuttara is very powerful. It comes with the specific reason and it makes accomplishment in one time. So it does not need to repeat, and also it does not have the remaining work for next time. That's why no functional. So we will clear more about that one when we study about the Lokuttara Chitta in detail. And second question, what does it mean? I correct catch.
Can we understand that Panyati can help us to understand the Paramata Sacha?
Panyati
can help us to understand the Paramata.
It's different from the Paramata, but it can, name. The Panyati can relate to the Paramata Satya, but it is different from the Paramata. I want to say, you can, you can put the name and to something, but that name is not that one. The name is just put on that thing. So for example, you can name the person as Dhammapiya or something like this. So the name is put on that individual, but it is different. Name and individuals are different, like this. So Panyati reference to the ultimate reality, but Panyati is Panyati, ultimate reality is another element, another category. So these are different.
Okay, thank you, Bante.
Yes, Ajay.
Thank you, Bante. Dharma friend and Lim, please proceed with your question.
Bante, very good morning to you. I have two questions. The first question regarding Ahetuka. So may I know what kind of beings that belong into this category? Can I say they are normally animals with very low senses? Because you say they have unwholesome resultant, they have rootless wholesome resultant. Normally, animals that not very low sense, they belongs to Ahetuka? This is my first question. The second question, Kama Vachara Sobhana. In the six Deva realm, so can I say they are all belongs to, their consciousness are all Kama Vachara Sobhana all the time? If they are Kama Vachara Sobhana all the time, why is it the naughty Deva in the Para Nimitta Vasawati, sometimes he can be very naughty Mara and try to disturb beings. So can that Kama Vachara Sobhana sometime not there for those higher rank? Yeah, that's all my question.
Okay, for the both question, I can answer. The Ahetuka consciousness is common to all beings except the Asanya Sada, all beings who those have the mental feathers. It means the Ahetuka will include the seeing consciousness, the hearing consciousness, and tasting or smelling or like this. So this common to us all the time. We are seeing. The Ahetuka consciousness is not for lower animals or lower realms of the beings. It's common to ourselves too, because they are not, although they are not beautiful, they are not blameworthy. They are just the result of wholesome and unwholesome. The blameworthy is the action is blameworthy. The result is not that. Result is just the result. So when we see the good things, this is the wholesome result and consciousness. When we see the bad thing, that is unwholesome result and consciousness. The seeing consciousness is the included under the category of Ahetuka, and also hearing or something like this. So we continuously, the seeing, hearing arising many times in our daily life. That is why Ahetuka Chitta is common to mostly all beings. And Kamavachara Sobhana, the beautiful sense pure consciousness, is not belong to the Deva. It belongs to the all sense pure consciousness, sense pure beings, including ourselves. So when we make the wholesome activity, that wholesome consciousness, one of the 8 Kamavachara wholesome consciousness, arise in our mind. And also the other resultant consciousness also arise in our mind. But the only thing, among the 8 and 24, there are functional 8 consciousness. 8 functional consciousness arise only in the Arhat's mind. The Arhat's mind, not for ordinary people's mind. Okay, so to conclude your question, this category of not belong to the specific beings, specific realms. So they related to all the sensuous beings. That's why Naughty Deva does not belong to the sensual, beautiful consciousness. Naughty Deva, in his mind, many times the unwholesome consciousness arise. Unwholesome, because it is naughty activities. Okay.
Sadhu, Bante.
Thank you, Bante.
Okay.
Dharma friend Heidi, please proceed with your question.
Good morning, Bante. I would like to ask that why is there no Akusala Vipaka with Hetu?
Yes, of course. Akusala Vipaka cannot produce the consciousness arise with hetu. That's the nature, because akusala vipaka, akusala can produce the some result. They are included all in rootless consciousness. It is enough, because you know the other types of vipaka with hetus is to be born in the beautiful realms. So due to the akusala cause, the being cannot be born in the beautiful realms. That's why the akusala vipaka does not belong to the consciousness with hetu.
Yes. Thank you, Bante.
Okay.
Thank you, Bante.
Okay.
Dhamma friend Didi, please proceed with your question.
Okay.
Yeah. Morning, Bante.
Morning.
I have question regarding the rootless chitta, ahetuka chitta. Yeah. Regarding this, Bante, just now earlier I also have question just like the earlier student about whether this rootless chitta appear in all being. The subsequent question appear in me that what happened to those that born with some babies or with the genetic problem, they always perpetually feel pain. Does that mean that they have this more unwholesome resultant, you know, or how about those that born defective, they can't feel, so seem that there's unwholesome resultant. So this chitta, does that mean the chitta appear, or the something wrong with the organ or something like that? Maybe, is that always appear in all the being, like regardless whether they can express it or not, you know, because some apparently in the medical, there's some of the kids they born with the defective, they cannot feel pain. Then some being they're born defective with they can't hear. So does that mean that chittas is still there, but simply the organ not working, or what? Maybe Bante could explain on these matters. Thank you, Bante.
Okay, so to classify the beings and the cause to become a beings. So since he was born as a human, in your question, the baby was born as a human. That is the cause of the result of the wholesome. So as a result of the wholesome, he was born as a human. But if he was born as the blind born, you know, from the beginning he was blind and he was dead, or like this, unable person, and also his intelligence also he not qualified to become a normal person. That is, you know, ahetuka. Ahetuka rebirth linking consciousness, due to the ahetuka rebirth linking consciousness, but it was produced by the wholesome. Yes, any beings born in the the beautiful realms, like starting from the human and deva, etc., they are all because of wholesome karma. That identifying the moment of the rebirth linking consciousness, Pradisandhi, the first moment of the life. But later, after that moment, the whole process of mentality and materiality can be influenced, both wholesome and unwholesome, done in the past, in any life. It does not related to the Pradisandhi. So the Pradisandhi moment is caused by the wholesome, but later, just after the Pradisandhi, sometime later, the unwholesome karma have the opportunity to give their result in the life. So he can be full of painful in the whole life. And this is the way we can understand the baby in not good situation. So painful feelings come due to the unwholesome. He was,
Okay.
but he was born as a human due to the wholesome.
Oh, born as a wholesome.
Right.
So the baby perpetually in pain. So it's the resultant of unwholesome resultant Chitta,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Bante. Sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Bante. We have one last question.
Okay.
Dhamma friend, Yi, please proceed with your question.
Okay. And may I ask Akahatuka consciousness with one root is, and how to understand the person? This is the first question, please.
Ahituka consciousness.
Yes,
Or
consciousness with one root. Consciousness with one root.
Okay. That types of person, Ekahituka, there is no Ekahituka person, because you know the roots, as I mentioned, the roots are loba, are dosa, are moha. They can be the roots to identify the person. So among these three roots, the two roots of alova, non-greed, and adosa, non-hatred, always arise together. Always arise together. And also without these two rules, the last one, the amoha rules also cannot arise. That's why a single root person, the Ekahituka person, cannot be happen.
And the second question is the rootless wholesome resultant and the rootless functional can get kusala or not.
Rootless wholesome resultants.
And the rootless functional can get the kusala or not if the function is good.
They are not included in the kusala. The rootless wholesome resultant is vipaka. Vipaka consciousness, and functional is kiriya. So they are not included in the wholesome consciousness, kusala. Not included in kusala.
It's not included, yeah. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bante.
Okay.
So thank you, Bante, very much for your teaching today.
Okay.
May Bante lead us in making aspiration and sharing of merits, please.
Okay. Okay. Okay, let's share our merits.
Bante, would you like me to share the sharing merit slide?
Okay.
One minute, please.
Okay, so to share merit. Good. Good. Okay. So please repeat after me. So imina punya kamena.
Imina punya kamena.
Mami bala samagamo.
Mame bala samagamo.
Sadam samagamo hodu.
Satam samagamo hotu.
Yawa nibbana patiyam.
Yawa nibbana patiya.
Idame punyam.
Idame punyam.
Asawakaya waham hodu.
Asawakaya waham hotu.
Idame punyam.
Idame punyam.
Nibbana sapachayo hodu.
Nibbana sapachayo hotu.
Mama punya bhagam.
Mama punya bhagam.
Sabba satanam bhajimi.
Savasadanam Bhajami
Isabi
Te Sabe
Me Samam
Me Samam
Punya Bhagam Lavandu
Punya Bhagam Labantu
Sadhu Sadhu
Sadhu
Sadhu.
Sadhu.
Okay, may all be happy and healthy in your life.
Thank you, Bhante.